This is the Toss-Up, where we take a look at some of the topics facing the world of sports, and then we dive deeper. Whether it's your best friend's fantasy team or the future of college athletics, we're just trying to expand the conversation and want to look at the topics that keep you tuned in to the beautiful world of sports. Professional athletes are in the public eye maybe more than any other profession. Football, baseball, basketball, soccer, or whatever sport entertains you. You are tuning in to be entertained. Thousands of people crowd into stadiums while millions more watch on televisions around the country. People tune in because they want a form of entertainment. In the past few years, and recently as well, player celebrations have been an intriguing talking point. Baker Mayfield of Oklahoma, Odell Beckham Jr. of the New York Football Giants, Jose Bautista of the Toronto Blue Jays. They have all had unique ways of expressing themselves at big moments during or after games. Whether it's stamping a flag in the middle of a road venue, pretending to urinate after a touchdown, or flipping a bat after a big home run. Every athlete has their own way of expressing themselves to celebrate. The NFL has recently lightened its stance on celebrations. Bat flips have been met with batters being hit by pitches. College athletes like Mayfield have been forced to apologize. But why? Are grown men getting their feelings hurt by these childlike semantics? Should professional leagues be penalizing athletes for adding another form of entertainment to the game? Why should athletes be punished on the field for something that is as meaningless as a little celebration? Joining me on the panel this week is Crimson Corey writer Michael Tilka, IUS TV Sports beat report, field hockey beat reporter Austin Render, and IUS TV Sports baseball beat reporter Austin Machicardi. Thank you for being here tonight, gentlemen. So celebration's a very interesting talking point. Kind of where do you stand on this issue, Michael?
I stand on the issue that I feel as though athletes always should have a right to celebrate and be excited about their accomplishments. But you also need to draw a line, and I think that's why for so many years the NFL had that rule of an excessive celebration penalty, because things do get out of hand. I mean, you were talking about earlier, sometimes it could lead to fights, it can lead to, it could be borderline taunting the opponent, and just setting that line is really why excessive celebration has sort of been in the past sort of looked down upon.
But seeing Baker Mayfield have to apologize for something that in the heat of the moment maybe he felt. I mean, that's a big game. Oklahoma just went on the road to the Horseshoe and beat Ohio State, stamps a flag in the ground, and then the next day has to apologize. Who's he apologizing to? Ohio State fans who were butthurt by losing? Like, I guess I don't agree with that. I think players, like Michael said, should have the freedom to express and celebrate.
On that point, you were talking about Baker Mayfield. I love what he did with that flag. That's such it was a kind of unique celebration. We hadn't seen that. And, him just taking that flag, stamping it into the middle of the O in the middle of the horseshoe, that was great. But then people just, they kind of overreacted, in my opinion. People are like, oh, well, act like you've been there before. Baker Mayfield is 20 years old? Oklahoma hasn't won in the shoe in 60 years. He hasn't been there before, so let him act like he hasn't been there before, in my opinion.
So, I mean, these are kind of grown adults. Do you think they should be forced to apologize, and should they feel like their feelings are really being hurt?
No, because it didn't feel like it was Baker Mayfield apologizing. It felt like it was his coaching staff, maybe the administration of Oklahoma, kind of putting words into his mouth and making him apologize.
Yeah, it was a PR thing because, you know Baker Mayfield. You know that he's a fiery competitor. He's that kind of guy that's going to take a flag and stamp it in the middle of the field and claim it as his after he wins. So, you know what? I think that those weren't his words at all. I think that he shouldn't have had to apologize either.
Well, I do agree that the celebration was awesome in and of itself. I do completely understand where the apology comes from. I mean, you can't necessarily disrespect a university like that. Yeah, it was cool because it was Ohio State that was being disrespected, but imagine that at a different school maybe. Maybe he does that at Indiana. Don't you think Indiana fans would be a little upset if Baker Mayfield or J.K. Dobbins at the end of the Ohio State-Indiana game just ran up and planted an Ohio State flag in the middle of the field.
You know what? I do think that they probably would be upset, and it might be warranted a little bit, but it sends a message: get better. If you don't want a team to come in there and stick their flag in the middle of your field, beat them. Don't lose the game at home. Teams, you want to cry about, oh well, he shouldn't have done it, blah blah blah. Your team should have been better. Sorry.
So if we're not okay with stamping in the middle of a field, maybe, what should be a kind of a form of celebration that would be accepted?
I think maybe something a little bit lighter would probably just be just waving the flag on the sideline, like, hey, here's a big Oklahoma flag, just wave it around or like run around with it. Just something about the plant. I don't know. Something gets to me with that. It feels so emphatic and it feels much more powerful. I'm just like, I claim this land for Norman, Oklahoma, and Boomer Sooner. It's just something about the planting. I'm not sure what it is, but it feels different than just the regular old flag waving, like, oh, we won, nice job.
But how do you set a line in celebration? No planting? How do you assess you're not allowed to plant things on the field? Or it's just such a blurred line between what you can and can't do if we start setting rules. And that's why I like that the NFL starting to relax a little bit, albeit not on the OBJ thing, but starting to relax a little bit. I just think it's so hard to draw a line in celebrations.
It really is, because it's kind of like you said, it's a blurred line. What makes, when Ezekiel Elliott jumps in the Salvation Army kettle, what makes that bad? When Odell Beckham Jr. decides that he's going to pretend to be a dog and, urinate on the field, what makes that good or bad? It seems like it's just an abstract thing that, it's kind of hard to set boundaries on.
So where do we draw this line? Is it's okay to celebrate maybe with your teammates? And going back to Odell Beckham, he did it basically, I think it was just with one other teammate standing there, but that was mostly him who was still in the end zone. But are we okay with this, maybe if they go over to their sideline and they're just kind of doing something amongst their own teammates?
I mean, I think Austin and I are okay with what's been going on right now. I love when athletes are able to express that raw emotion, what's going on at that moment. And that's what I think, to relate it to my personal sport of golf, when you make a big putt, you let out a big fist bump. You let out a scream sometimes, and that's just what you're feeling at that moment. And I think it's cool to see the spontaneous celebrations, like OBJ deciding he wanted to act like a dog. And I mean, I think that's just cool to see the creativity and the expression of the players in that moment.
It's like you said in your monologue. This is entertainment. Major sports are a form of entertainment. Were you not entertained by Odell Beckham Jr.? Were you not entertained by Baker Mayfield? Those things were fun, and they made sports fun. And a lot of people are complaining, oh, well, we're talking about a lot of heavy stuff with sports nowadays. This is a way to make it fun. Let the players get creative with it.
Yeah, well, I may be on the side of I'm not totally on board with what Baker Mayfield would have done. I thought the Odell Beckham thing was hilarious because it's like, he's acting like a dog. How is that not funny? A dog peeing on a fire hydrant? Come on, that's hilarious. And I'm glad to see that the NFL has sort of lifted those restrictions on excessive celebration and the like.
So the NFL has definitely lightened their stance kind of on the celebration issue, but in college football and in college athletics really in general, they're kind of taking a harder stance to it. What do you think has to change from college sports to maybe let that happen? Is it just players getting their feelings hurt, or is it kind of a bigger issue than just that?
Well, I think there's more fans with that school pride kind of thing in college, whereas it's not like in the pros you went to the Indianapolis Colts or something. So when your school, like Ohio State, gets embarrassed on the field and then with the flag that Baker planted, I think Ohio State fans got offended because it was their school. It's where they went. It's who they root for. So I think there's more of a pride sort of thing in college than there is in the NFL. I don't agree that there should be any differences, though.
I think that once college athletics sees, whether or not this works in the NFL, whether the more lax rules are, whether they affect the game in a major way or whatnot, I think that they'll kind of follow suit. If it's not a big deal in the NFL, maybe they'll try to, maybe lighten it up a little bit in college, let them, do kind of similar things.
I think another thing to sort of keep in mind is just sort of the parity between professional sports and college sports, because I mean, in college sports, you could be up 30 points in a basketball game, and if a kid at the end of the game decides, you know what, I'm gonna chuck up to 3 and put us up 33 points, that can sort of be seen as disrespectful yet sort of celebratory. Whereas in the NFL or in the NBA, that's your job, and if you're getting beat by 30 points, that's sort of on you, not necessarily your school or your program or anything like that. So I think I really understand why in college it's a much bigger deal to do the excessive celebration, while it's in pros, it's your job.
So to close out this discussion, I want to kind of go back down memory lane a little bit. Just go around. What's your first celebration you remember from an athlete?
So I'm not sure if this is technically going to count as a celebration, but I'm still going to go with it anyway. I remember the first few years, 19, 20, 21-year-old LeBron would walk up to the scorer's table at the beginning of games and toss all that chalk in the air. Something about it just was so cool, and all I think it was the photos really of just all that chalk hanging in the air and sort of the magic of LeBron James and seeing a kid just light up the NBA and take a team from nothing to something, especially in 2007 when he took a team whose second best player was probably Zydrunas Ilgauskas all the way to the NBA Finals. I mean, how can you not root for a guy like that? And so I think that's why the chalk in the air has to be the celebration for me to remember.
For me, I grew up in golf, and I grew up watching Tiger Woods, and not live. I didn't see this live. This is in 2000, but obviously all over recordings where Tiger walks the putt in and points it down. That is a moment I will always remember. And then just the massive Tiger Woods fist bumps, the undercuts, that kind of stuff. It's incredible the shots he pulls off, and then he just unleashes his emotion. So I wish he was still in the game today, because his celebrations are top notch.
I think that we were really lucky as far as celebrations goes, because we grew up with some legendary celebrations. You look at the NFL, you got a guy like Terrell Owens, who's, he's dancing on the Cowboys star. He's got the popcorn and he's shaking it into his face mask. He's taking out a pen out of his sock and signing a ball and throwing it in the stands. He's got a cell phone in the field goal post and he's taking it out and making a call after a touchdown. And then you've got a guy like Chad Ochocinco, who was always on some crazy antics. So those are the guys that I remember as when I think about celebrations.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many good celebrations in sports. We're going to talk about a different type of celebration coming up after the break. Our panel will take a look at the upcoming MLB postseason, so stick with us. Welcome back to the Toss-Up. We just got finished talking about celebrations in sports. We now focus our attention on celebrating the top 12 teams in Major League Baseball with the MLB postseason right around the corner. Both wild card races have been fascinating with major surprises. We also have the Indians ripping off one of the best 30-game stretches in Major League history. Then you have the minor collapse of the Dodgers. And have we forgot about the Cubs? There are so many good storylines heading into baseball's postseason. So guys, what's kind of that storyline that you're looking at heading in to October?
Well, I think the big storyline for me has to be the Houston Astros. Just with Sports Illustrated putting the pressure on them roughly 3 or 4 years ago, putting out a cover saying, "You're 2017 World Series champions," and with the recent topping of the AL West and with Hurricane Harvey, I really think that's the team for me to watch.
For me, it's Cleveland. Did they peak too early? They were so hot, obviously winning all those games in a row, but was it too early? Are they going to cool off now as we head into October, or are they going to continue that hot streak a couple more weeks?
For me, it's probably the return of Aaron Judge, because he was just electric during the first half. Then, he had a little second half struggle, but over the last few weeks, he's been coming back a little bit. He's kind of reinserted himself into the AL MVP conversation, and I'm just interested to see how the rookie does in the playoffs.
Yeah, that'll be a very interesting storyline. He'll be in that wild card game against the Minnesota Twins. That'll be interesting to see just that one-game wild card. But to your point about the Dodgers, the Indians, the Dodgers are also a very similar team where did they both peak too early? Because the Dodgers were on one of the best 2-month stretches in Major League history, and the Indians went on an incredible 30-game run. Is it an issue for these teams to maybe be playing their best baseball in July or August compared to the end of September going into October?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a thing of did they peak too early. Sometimes you're going to hit stretches where you're firing on all cylinders. Some stretches you just can't seem to find the right thing. So it's more so of a matter, can they find that sort of magic again? I'm not too worried about whether they peaked or not, but I would pick these two teams as still my favorites to match up against the World Series, just because they're the two teams that I also see coming in with postseason experience last year. Obviously, Cleveland wanting to get back after losing games 5, 6, and 7 to the Chicago Cubs, and even the Los Angeles Dodgers losing to the Cubs as well.
I look at a team like the Astros have been consistent all year. They haven't been like down at any point in the year, but they haven't had any of these runs that like the Dodgers and the Indians have had. They've just been consistent. Then you look at the Cubs. They're getting hot at the right time. Their pitching is starting to come back. They're getting healthy. Their bats are starting to work. I think that's kind of what has hurt the Dodgers. I mean, Adrian Gonzalez getting hurt is definitely a big thing for them. So injuries, obviously health going into October, and I truly believe that there is a lot to say about momentum that you're taking in to October, and the Cubs sure have a lot of that.
In my opinion, baseball is just a very, very interesting game because, if one pitch is just 2 or 3 inches to the left, it's a game-winning homer instead of a ground out to end the game. It's just there's tiny little things in baseball that can completely change everything. So in my opinion, I don't think that it's necessarily a did they peak too early. I think you just look at the talent on their rosters. These are two very, very good teams. I think that, if they play their best baseball, they should do fairly well in the postseason.
What's crazy about the postseason is it really comes down all season. We've talked about the home run hitters, the records for all these teams in home runs. It comes down to pitching, and it comes down to can you put 3 aces out there and possibly have a 4th there waiting to use in game 4 or in the bullpen, because in the postseason, it just becomes solely on who has the best pitching staff. And that's why the Cubs did so well last year. The hitting wasn't there in October, but guys like Arrieta, Hendricks, Lackey, and Lester carried them through October.
Yeah, and the Cubs just clinching that Central Division not too long ago, but they were there last year. The Nationals were there last year. The Dodgers were there last year. There's so many teams that I feel like have been there year in and year out. Do we want to see more parity in baseball than just the same teams repeating year in and year out?
I think everybody wants to see parity in baseball, and I do believe we're getting that parity this year. I think just with the Minnesota Twins alone, they lost over 100 games last year, and they come back and they get in the wild card spot. The first time that's ever been done in Major League history. Aaron Judge and the Yankees, no one really saw them coming out this year, but then again, I don't know how you can really bet against a guy who's 6'6" and can hit a home run 495 yards. Or 495 feet, excuse me. So
Yards would be impressive.
Oh,
Wow.
yards.
That would be a record breaker.
Very important distinction there. But I do think we are seeing some of that parity, and I think you're going to see teams in the next few years, such as the Chicago White Sox, are going with sort of a kitchen sink strategy and saying, we're getting rid of everybody. We'll see you in a few years. The Astros, a few years back, they're part of that too, where they said, we're getting rid of everybody. We'll see you in a few years. And this is sort of their year where it's like, hey, it's our time. Let's go take October.
That's why I think there is parity in the MLB, because look, a few years ago, you had teams like the Royals, the Giants. Now I know it's an odd year, so the Giants are irrelevant.
Definitely can't talk about them.
But the Rangers, those teams are not really circling. The Cardinals are probably not going to make the playoffs this year. So you got teams like the Twins, the Astros, possibly the Rockies. These teams are new to the postseason a little bit over the past few years, and even the Cubs. They went so long without the postseason. It's only been 3 years now that they've been in it. So while they've been the last 3 years, they're still a relatively newer team to the postseason, to this success.
And you want to talk about parity, I mean, you just look at the wild card races. Adding that second wild card spot has been revolutionary for the MLB. Because even if your team isn't necessarily that good, they can stay in the race for a longer period of time. They don't get canned in, the first week of August or something because they're just that bad. Even I guess it was statistically possible that the Phillies would make it for a while, and then they finally got eliminated because they're not good. But, that second wild card spot, is just that. It's a wild card, and it allows allows a lot of teams to stake their claim to the postseason for longer.
And Austin, to your point about the Cubs, this is the first time they've been in the playoffs 3 straight years since 1906, 07, and 08. So it's been
Exactly.
over a century, and then add another decade on top of that. Just been an incredible run for the Cubs.
Yeah, so just because they're here for the 3rd straight year, that's still parity that they have been here now for a couple of years. And you look at, I just think back when Joe Madden was in Tampa Bay. The Rays were a solid contender in the postseason. They're no longer there. The Orioles were starting to make some runs. So I think it's more of the wild card shuffles in and out. The Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, now the Nationals and the Cubs are really going to be steady. But it's those wild card teams, Twins, Angels, Blue Jays, Rays. Those teams are going to kind of switch their way in and out.
I mean, I even remember at one point reading about how there was a hypothetical 8-way tie for that the last wild card spot or the last 2 wild card spots. So I think Austin hit the nail on the head. Just that adding that second spot to just sort of get that extra tension. Now I do believe that I think it'd be better if the wild card game was more than just a 1-game playoff, because I think it might even be more beneficial to do 2 out of 3 games, but still I think that second team adds so much.
And with that point that you brought up where, maybe expanding the wild card a little bit, that would be something that some teams would certainly be in favor of, because it basically, in that one game, it's who has the best pitcher. If you have the MVP, or if you have the Cy Young winner that year and you're in the wild card game, guess what? You win. You're going to the divisional series. So, I think that happened to the Pittsburgh Pirates a few years in a row. They kept running into the NL Cy Young winner over and over and over, and it's like they just couldn't get and push through to the division series.
I just don't think we're ever going to reach true parity until the Seattle Mariners break their 16-year drought from the playoffs. But that's beside the point. So to close this out, just kind of what's the biggest storyline you're looking at in this postseason, Michael?
Like I said earlier, to start off the second half of the show, I really think that Houston is going to rally and I think will really take this thing. I think they have the whole community on their back, especially with things after Hurricane Harvey and things like that. I think you saw that with the New Orleans Saints when Drew Brees took them to beat the Indianapolis Colts in the Super Bowl. So I think even though you have teams like the Dodgers and the Indians with those fantastic streaks, I just think the community and the Astros themselves will just rally and will take this thing home.
I'm looking at pitching. I know everybody looks at pitching, but guys like the Astros picking up Justin Verlander, that could be huge for Houston in terms of a veteran type of experience. Now, I know he hasn't been to too many World Series, but he's still a veteran. Guys like Clayton Kershaw, Steven Strasburg, Max Scherzer in Nationals and in the Cubs rotation, can they start to wake up? I'm looking for those pitchers to step up, because teams like the Yankees and the Red Sox don't have a whole lot of stars on their pitching staff. You look at Chris Sale, but other than that, they don't have as many stars maybe the Cubs or the Dodgers have.
I'm looking for a team to come out and establish themselves as a dominant force. Because, you look at it, there really aren't necessarily 2 clean-cut favorites to make it to the World Series. In the NL, you've got the Dodgers, the Nats, but those 2 teams are known to, kind of choke a little bit in the postseason. So, maybe they're not really established as those dominant teams. And in the AL, you've got, the Astros, they're very good. The Indians, they're very good. The Yankees have, they have some bats. They could probably make some noise if the things fall the right way. So I'm looking for a team to just come out and establish themselves as the dominant force in the MLB, kind of just take the reins and run all the way to the World Series.
Do we have any final thoughts here before we wrap things up, either celebrations, MLB, or whatever's on your mind?
Well, I just think that the celebrations, I understand after these past few weeks why excessive celebration was sort of set into place. And I do think that it's good for the NFL to sort of win back some fans and say, hey, let these players have some fun.
I think celebration is so much entertainment. I think people overthink the getting into other people's heads, trying to taunt other people. The Ryder Cup last year, when Patrick Reed and Rory McIlroy both made their putts and they both screamed and fist bumped, and Patrick Reed gave the waggle, and then they fist bumped right afterwards, laughed about it, moved on. This stuff is all in good fun. They all are getting paid to do this stuff. They know it's their job. They're going to have fun with it, and that's why I think celebration should be a part of things.
I want to go back to celebration as well, because I feel like the one sport we didn't really talk about with celebration was baseball, despite you mentioning it in the intro to the show. I think that baseball is really interesting here because it's kind of like there's two schools of thought. You know, you've got kind of like maybe the older crowd. They're like, oh, well, you know, respect the game, play the game the right way and whatnot. And then you've got the other ones, you know, kind of like, oh, these bat flips are awesome. You know, you hit a home run, pimp that, flip that bat. And, you know, it's interesting to see like the kind of two schools of thought going head to head, especially when it's a game that's trying to, you know, market itself more to the younger crowd. It'll be interesting to see maybe if, you know, plunking a hitter after a bat flip kind of dies down a little bit or whatnot because of that.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. As for me, I just hope fans enjoy going and seeing these sporting events. And I think having celebrations adds to that entertainment factor. That's what sports boils down to. You're going to be entertained. That's why you get 70,000 fans at a football game. That's why you get millions more watching on TV. People are there to be entertained, and celebrations just add a little bit more to that. That does it for this week's show. Be sure to continue the discussion on our Twitter page at IUSTV Sports and on Facebook at IUSTV Sports. You can always give any suggestions for the show and ask any questions you might have. Toss it up. Find out if we'll catch it. We'll see you next Sunday.